I am grateful that you asked me to speak about my thoughts regarding behind the mask. I first had to wear face masks about 6.5 years ago when I was in treatment for my acute myeloid leukemia. I had to have massive doses of chemotherapy followed by a stem cell transplant, which left my immune system compromised. So, to protect myself, I had to wear face masks and gloves each time I left my room, when in the hospital, or anytime I left my home to venture outside. My medical team wanted me to try to participate in the world and to not isolate myself. They wanted me to socialize, to exercise by walking in nature, and to do other day-to-day activities. They knew that being in the world would help in my recovery. I was alone in wearing the mask. People would stare at me and try to distance themselves from me as they made assumptions as to why I was wearing the mask. In fact, one time I was in the elevator in the hospital, standing in the back while wearing my face mask. And each time the door opened and someone entered the elevator, they looked at me and moved to the far corner away from me. This happened every single time that the elevator door opened. There they were, all crunched up together, strangers to each other, yet standing closely in the opposite corner away from me. There was this noticeable space, chasm between me and them. It made me pause and even laugh. It was very obvious. They were fearful of whatever they thought I might have hidden behind my face mask. They made assumptions when, in actuality, I was wearing the face mask to protect me from their germs. Since March 2020, as many started wearing face masks, I felt at ease wearing them. They felt familiar and were a reminder of my previous life. The use of them changed, however, as we learned more about COVID-19. I understood that we were wearing them to protect others from our own breath and germs. Then, as it became controversial to those who refused to wear their face masks, I wondered, why would some not wear them? With the science behind how COVID-19 is spread, why would it become such an issue that some would take a stance against wearing them? And then also, what are the assumptions that we are making when we see folks out and about without their face masks? And what are the assumptions they are making towards those who wear them? There are many emotions that are connected to the wearing of these face masks: fear, gratitude, disappointment, trust, anger, and more. We've all heard stories of people who have been ridiculed and harassed on both sides of the face mask issue. These pieces of fabric that cover our faces are powerful indeed. I started thinking of our face masks like we are superheroes. Our face masks are our capes, costumes, and mysterious identities when we wear them. They signal our superpowers to others, such as caring for, protecting, and simply loving others around us. We visibly are showing that each time we are out in public and wear our face masks. This is similar to me as when we are driving and we stop at the intersection when the light is red. I am using my power of yielding to you so that you may safely pass. This is what we do when we are in a community, when we are in this world together, not alone or seeking our own needs and wishes at the expense of others' safety and well-being. Sometimes we yield so others may be safe. As I walk through the grocery store while wearing my face mask, I do so proudly, using my superhero stance. And when I see you wearing a face mask, I feel you are saying that you love me and are trying to take care of me too. We are each giving and receiving while wearing our face masks. My faith, Unitarian Universalism, calls me to value the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the importance of the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. We are not in this world alone, but are social beings who move each day alongside each other. My faith calls me to respect and care for others, to live out our values with each and every interaction. The Zen master and global spiritual leader, poet, and peace activist, the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, says, "This is the act of interbeing. You cannot just be by yourself alone. We coexist. We are in relationship with others. There is no separation between you and them. Others help to define who we are, and we help to define who they are. We inter-are." Indeed, how we act can impact our planet for thousands of generations in positive and negative ways. Even in our darkest moments, we need to remember that, as Howard Thurman wrote, quote, "Hope is the remembrance of radiance, the assurance that light will be light, even when walking in dark places." The Reverend Amy Levi Lyons, senior minister at First Unitarian Congregational Society in Brooklyn, New York, recalls how in 1995, a long truck pulled into Yellowstone National Park carrying 8 Canadian wolves. This shipment of wolves had been for years the focal point of explosive political battles. Wolves had been hunted to eradication in Yellowstone by 1930, and for almost 70 years, there were no wolves in the park. During that time, the health of the ecosystem and many species had declined. Elk, free from their predators, had munched the trees and bushes around the waterways down to stubs. The beavers then no longer had good materials to make their dams, and so were failing. The numbers of fish and animals that lived in the water had dropped dramatically. Birds of all kinds were struggling. The banks of the rivers had eroded, and the rivers had become shallower and slower. Everything was slowing and declining. It was as if the life force in the entire region was fading, a dark moment in the life of Yellowstone National Park. Reverend Levi Lyons stated that the pack of wolves that arrived in 1995 thrived and grew and eventually reached a robust population. As the wolves came back, one by one, plants along the riversides, the beavers, and all the other animals, fish, and birds that began to return as well. Even the elk fared well. They just hid more in the deeper forests and didn't linger while snacking by the water. The rivers themselves changed shape, becoming deeper and faster flowing, with more estuaries that support wildlife and more sharply defined banks because of better soil that were eroding less. This small group of wolves simply by being themselves and doing what wolves do, brought balance back to the ecosystem and life back to the earth. The biologists had tipped the first domino, had acted on the hope that Yellowstone could be brought back to life, and nature took care of the rest. How we act can impact our planet for thousands of generations indeed. Imagine a pebble that is dropped into a body of water. You see, it causes ripples that cascade out wider and wider. These ripples affect the whole ecosystem surrounding it, causing hundreds of ripples and changes wherever they touch. In fact, you see that the impact of that drop of the single pebble has a much greater force than it did alone. And like the dropped pebble, so can our loving kindness have an impact on others. We are all interconnected. What we do affects others. And in fact, this impact can be felt for generations and generations. Think about ways that you are a beneficiary of goodness from previous generations. My own parents and relatives were imprisoned in concentration camps during World War II because of their Japanese heritage. They told stories about people and instances of goodness that they experienced, even in the midst of the difficulties of their imprisonment. One example is that of a neighbor who safeguarded their home and farmland until they returned. These experiences of kindness and love impacted my parents and the way they raised me and my siblings. To be kind and considerate of others' feelings, experiences, and welfare. To have a gentle, calm strength to cope with things that are out of our control, and to persist and find solutions to problems and challenges that we encounter. This is just one example of how loving kindness can be transmitted from generation to generation. I have tried to pass these bits of wisdom on to my children, students, and others that I interact with. And the more of us that behave in this way, the stronger and longer lasting the impact. Reverend Levi Lyons says that when we perform even one small act of courageous love, it can trigger a cascade of goodness that pours into our lives and out to our families, to our communities, and to the ecosystems of the world itself, not just to the third or fourth generations, but to the 1,000th generation. It took my diagnosis of acute myeloid leukemia, the treatments of chemotherapy to try to hold it off, and then ultimately the need for a stem cell transplant, a life-saving gift by an anonymous donor, to make me understand deeply and personally that the length of our life is inevitably short. However, every moment of our life gives us an opportunity to affect others in a loving, kind way. Realistically, as an individual, I will be forgotten years and decades later, but ultimately, I can, by my small and big everyday acts of loving kindness, help to move people and our world towards a more loving and kinder future. Just as the introduction of wolves into Yellowstone Park and the stone dropped in water, the impact of my loving, kind actions has the potential to cascade out wider and wider. The Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh says, peace is present right here and now in ourselves and in everything we do and say. Every breath we take, every step we take can be filled with joy, peace, and serenity. The question is whether or not we are in touch with it. We need only to be awake, alive in the present moment. So I ask you to look deeply inside of yourself. Take into consideration your values, your faith, and your experiences. Who are you behind your mask? What is your superpower? How will you leave your imprint on this earth for thousands of generations?